Good morning and welcome to Discover Christian Church. We're so glad you're here with us. Our mission is to love God, love people, and impact the world. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Discover Christian Church. I'm super glad you're here, whether it's first time, you've been here every week since you were born, basically, online or in person. I'm glad you're here with us today. For anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Tyler Bruni, and I am the student minister here at Discover, so I get to hang out with all of these lovely young people up here. Get to minister to 7th graders through seniors in high school, and it is honestly awesome. I absolutely love it. It's a lot of fun. So I'm excited to be able to share this message with you all today because it's a slightly different audience than what I am used to. So last week, we started our brand new series called Fear Less, where we are talking about 2 Timothy 1:7, and more specifically, just kind of talking about how God hasn't given us the spirit of fear and how we should be working as followers of Christ to overcome fear and these other obstacles in our life and be more focused on God and our love and all of that than we are on personal consequences or anything like that. So let's go ahead and read this verse together. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but one of power, love, and sound judgment. 2 Timothy 1:7. All right. So like I said, God didn't give us a spirit of fear. He gives us one of power, which Steve talked about last week, love, which we get to talk about today, and then sound judgment, which we'll cover next week. Now, for a little context on this letter, this is Paul writing to his good friend Timothy. He calls him earlier in the letter his dearly beloved son. He cares a lot about Timothy. And as we can understand from the context, he is experiencing some fear, some timidity. There's something that he is facing that is preventing him from doing his job and preaching the word of God to people. And Paul is just trying to encourage his good friend. He's like, hey, I get it. There's stuff happening. It's natural to be afraid, but that's not from God. That's from somewhere else. God gave us a spirit of power, love, and sound judgment, and we need to rely on those things in order to overcome it. So, one of the ways, like I said, that Paul tells us we can overcome fear is through love. And this brings up the all-important question, what is love? Also, I hope that song is now stuck in your head. It's been stuck in my head for like a week and a half now, and I just really, really happy I don't got to listen to it too much longer. But I love coffee. Coffee is great. I start every morning with at least 1 cup of coffee. It's not a problem. It's fine. I drink a couple extra throughout the day, and it's all good. I love pizza. It is hands down my favorite food. I could eat pizza every single day of my life, and I wouldn't get tired of it. Everyone else around me would get very tired of it, but I wouldn't. I also love Star Wars. Star Wars is one of my favorite movie series. I love the Mandalorian TV show. From the moment I saw Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, in theaters when I was a little kid, I was hooked. Lightsabers, super cool. Just ask my middle schoolers. I have a collection of lightsabers in my office. We used one of them as a talking stick at one point for our life group. It was a lot of fun. And I also love my amazing wife, Lizzie. Well, that's the appropriate response. Thank you for that. Especially because she's in here this service. Yeah, now, I hope you guys all understand and realize that when I use the word love in all of those different sentences, I don't mean the exact same thing. And if I did, well, as Ron Weasley would say, I need to sort out my priorities. You shouldn't use the same word to talk about your favorite food, a TV or a movie that you like, and then your devotion to your family and to your wife. That doesn't make sense. But that's where we are in culture today. We throw love around and just use it to talk about anything. I don't have a good word to describe my feelings towards this, so it's love. I'm just going to say I love it because that's easier than figuring out a way to actually articulate it. Anymore, for us, love is just kind of like a junk drawer. We just use it for everything. It's kind of lost a little bit of its meaning. You combine that with the fact that depending on which expert you talk to, there are between 3 and 9 different Greek words that are all translated to our modern English word, love. So that doesn't help make it less confusing at all. The most common 3 that we will see throughout the New Testament are Eros, Phileo, and Agape. And they all refer to these different kinds of love, the same way I talk about different things that I love, like coffee or pizza. So one good example of this is Phileo refers to a friendship or brotherly kind of love, which is why Philadelphia is referred to as the city of brotherly love, because it comes from that same root word. Now, the word Paul uses here is the word agape. It's probably his most commonly used word for love throughout all of his letters. The best way that we can describe what agape love is an unselfish and self-sacrificial love for others, to the point where you don't care how it inconveniences you, what it costs you, what you have to give up. You just love that person and care for them so much that you're willing to put them before yourself. When we read that, we can see that love is pretty action-based. You have to act upon the love. It's not all feelings. Obviously, there are feelings involved with love, but unlike how our culture would say love is pretty much all feelings, the Bible is telling us love is how you act and how you treat others. So we need to live in a way that we show love to others. And when we have this kind of love pouring out of us, that's filling us up, it drives out the fear in our lives. And this isn't to say that because you love people, there's not going to be any fear you ever deal with, but it is going to be helping you overcome it. John, in his first letter, kind of expands upon this idea or gives us a similar one. 1 John 4:18 says, "There is no fear in love. Instead, perfect love drives out fear, because fear involves punishment, so the one who fears is not complete in love." Again, here, John is also using the word agape. He's using it to, again, talk about we need to be filling ourselves up with love. Someone who's full of love can't have fear in them because, as he's saying it, fear and love are incompatible. The more full of love you have, the less room there is for fear. The same way when you turn on a light switch, the light drives out the darkness. There isn't room for it left when you are that full of it. But fear is not the only thing that is incompatible with love and that we struggle with today. The great theologian Dallas Willard once said this: "Hurry is the great threat to spiritual life in our day. You must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life." We'll go ahead and read that again for us. Hurry is the great threat to spiritual life in our day, and you must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. Now, at first glance, that seems super extreme, right? You're ruthlessly eliminating something. That is a huge step to take. And then you look at it and you're like, hurry? That's the great threat to spiritual life. Not any of the other things happening in culture around us. Hurry is the big thing that you're going to tell us is the one we need to overcome the most. It's the worst thing that we struggle with. In his book, titled after this, saying by Dallas Willard, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, John Mark Comer, he breaks it down to this one very simple point. Hurry is incompatible with love and the life of Jesus. Jesus himself, I don't think any of us would argue that Jesus is the perfect example of love. Jesus came to earth because he loved us so much and was willing to die for us. We didn't do anything to deserve that. Jesus loved us that much. We also can see this play out through Jesus' life, the way that he ministers to those around him, the way that he's always open to having a conversation with people. He's never in too much of a hurry. Jesus lives an unhurried life. The best example I can think of this comes to us from Luke chapter 8, where Jesus heals the woman who has been suffering from bleeding for 12 years. Luke chapter 8, verses 40 through 45 say, "When Jesus returned, the crowd welcomed him, for they were expecting him. Just then, a man named Jairus came. He was the leader of the synagogue. He fell down at Jesus' feet and pleaded with him to come to his house, because he had an only daughter, a about 12 years old, and she was dying. While he was going, the crowds were nearly crushing him. A woman suffering from bleeding for 12 years, who had spent all she had on doctors, and yet could not be healed by any, approached from behind and touched the end of his robe. Instantly her bleeding stopped. "Who touched me?" Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the crowds are hemming you in and pressing against you." Leave it to good old Peter to say exactly what we all would have been thinking in that moment. Like, what are you talking about? Of course someone touched you, Jesus. We're in a giant crowd. There's people everywhere. Everyone's getting bumped. Now, I know crowds seem like a really weird thing for us to think about now with this past year and a half that we've had. It maybe makes you a little uncomfortable, but the best thing that I can think of, or what I picture reading this, is the south entrance to Ohio Stadium on a Buckeye game day. If you've ever been there on that day, you know that that's not the entrance to go to unless you're a student and you need to get in that way, because all the students are there in lines. It's a giant cluster of humans standing around, and there is absolutely zero chance you walk through there without bumping into somebody or having someone else bump into you. That's kind of how this is here with Jesus. There are so many people around in this small area that, there is zero chance that he's going to make it through this crowd without somebody bumping into him or touching him. But we see Jesus stop, and he asks, "Who touched me?" Now, Jesus wasn't confused here. He knew what happened. He knew who it was, and he knew what was happening in that moment. He's not asking because he's like, "Hey, I really need to know this because I got to." He understands, but this moment, he's slowing down, and he's taking this time to love on this woman, to show her love. You see, she had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, which meant for 12 years, according to the Jewish law, she was unclean. So no one else would touch her for fear of being unclean. She ended up becoming an outcast, basically. And she would probably have felt very unloved in that moment. And Jesus is taking this time to tell her, "I love you. I care about you. I want what's best for you." If we go ahead and pick up our story a little bit, we're going to skip ahead to verses 48 and 49, which say, "Daughter," he said, "your faith has saved you. Go in peace." While he was still speaking, someone came from the synagogue leader's house and said, "Your daughter is dead. Don't bother the teacher anymore." So Jesus is on his way to heal this girl of her sickness, and now she is dead. The whole reason Jesus sets out towards that place is now kind of like a moot point. She has died, but he was going there to heal her because he stopped to take this time and spend it with this woman. Now, spoiler alert for the end of the story, Jesus does end up going to the house and raising the girl from the dead, so we don't have to worry there. She does come back. But I think it's important we take a step back from the story and look at it as a whole. Because if you're anything like me, I read this and I was like, wait, those happen at the same time? I thought those were two different stories. I forgot how they're intertwined with each other. For me, I was like, okay, I know Jesus heals a woman who's been bleeding for 12 years. I know Jesus raises a sick girl from the dead. I forget that they're together in one story. See, Jesus understands that he's on his way to do a great thing, an awesome thing. He's going to heal this girl of her sickness. That's amazing. But he doesn't let the great thing that he's actively going to do interfere with him and stop him from doing something else great in that moment. Jesus stops, and he doesn't miss this chance to spend time with the woman and to show her love. So how are we doing that in our own lives? And I understand it, life gets super, super busy. Once you throw work and school and sports and all those other things in there, your schedule can fill up really, really fast. But the real question is, are you too focused on just getting to the next place and doing the next thing that you're not stopping and looking at those people around you and seeing who it is that you could form a connection with or that you could love on, show the love of Jesus to? Our vision here at Discover is reach, love, imitate, and duplicate. The first two of those are the ones that I'm going to dig into here a little bit. And they say, we are a church that intentionally reaches into the global and local community, developing authentic relationships, loving people where they are, especially in their brokenness and messiness, but loving them too much to let them stay there. If we are always in a hurry when we're out in the community, then we're not going to be able to build those authentic relationships that we are desiring to have. You don't become best friends with someone or even good friends with someone by your couple random bump-ins with them at the grocery store. When it's like, oh, hey, how you doing? Good, how are you? Okay, well, see you later. And then you just walk, that's not going to build the genuine connection that you're looking for and to help them. You have to be intentional about this. Like I said, love is more than just feelings. It is an action that we are supposed to do. You must spend time with people. When I was in high school, my friends reached into my little messy life, and they brought me here. And now I get to stand here in front of you and talk to you guys today. They didn't wait until I managed to stumble into this building when it would be way more convenient for them to love on me and to spend time with me. They went out of their way to make sure that somebody was doing that. So love is more than just a feeling, it's an action. It's living an unhurried and unselfish life. But what does that really mean? What does that practically look like in our lives, to live unselfish and hurried, to live a loving life? What does that mean? What does that look like? Well, I think it is time that we go there. And by there, I mean the chapter that you guys all thought of when you probably heard love. The chapter that if you've ever been to a wedding before, I almost guarantee you have heard this. That is 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Now, it is the most famous chapter on love in the Bible for a good reason. It is awesome. But as we read through this, I want us to make sure that we're focusing on the words and what it says and what it's calling this church in Corinth to do and what it's calling us to do today, and not be distracted by the fact I've heard this 100 times, it's fine, I know what it's saying. We should really dig in because this cuts to the core of why we as a church exist. We're supposed to love others. The church in Corinth wasn't doing the best job of it. That's why Paul writes this, to encourage them. And we still have it today to encourage us to do a better job and to keep going. So, 1 Corinthians chapter 13 says, "If I speak human or angelic tongues, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith that I can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. And if I give away all my possessions, and if I give over my body in order to boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient, love is kind. Love does not envy, is not boastful, is not arrogant, is not rude, is not self-seeking, is not irritable, and does not keep a record of wrongs. Love finds no joy in unrighteousness, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. But as for prophecies, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when the perfect comes, the partial will come to an end. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put aside childish things. For now we see only a reflection as in a mirror, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I will know fully, as I am fully known. Now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love." It's a pretty short chapter in the Bible, but there is so much there that we can take away and still apply to our lives today. Paul starts this with this warning that it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter how great it is or how amazing you are at it. If you do it without love, it means nothing. You're just a noisy gong or clanging cymbals. And as someone who is a percussionist from 7th grade through my sophomore year of high school, I can tell you those are really obnoxious, really loud things. They're not fun to be around. So I don't know about you guys, but I really don't like the idea of being compared to those. That doesn't make me feel good. Paul here then breaks it down. He's got a list of 16 things. 8 things that love is, and 8 things that love is not. Those things are, love is patient. Love is kind. Love rejoices in the truth. Love bears all things. Love believes all things. Love hopes all things. Love endures all things. Love never ends. Love does not envy. Love does not boast. Love is not arrogant. Love is not rude. Love is not self-seeking. Love is not irritable. Love does not keep a record of wrongs. And love does not find joy in unrighteousness. This is a super handy little list. I would recommend for all of you guys at some point to write those things down and have that, because it is really nice to go back to that and look at, okay, this is what love is, these are things that love is not. But it doesn't matter how many times we've heard this. It doesn't matter how well you know it, unless you take that next step. We need to take the next step and figure out, how do we apply this to our lives? What does it mean to love in this way? And I think the simplest way to start that is by asking the simple, easy questions that come from this. Am I patient? Not just patient when you're waiting for your table at a restaurant, or for the DoorDasher to show up, or your takeout order to be ready. Like, anyone can be patient during that. What about when you're driving somewhere, you're gonna be late to work, someone cuts you off, or you get stuck in traffic? How patient are you in those moments? Or when you're trying to get somewhere in the morning, like maybe it was this morning trying to get here to church, and you're ready, and you're ready to go out the door, you've got everything, and your family, or your kids, or whoever it is, isn't ready. They're still running around trying to get ready. Do you stand there just tapping your foot, getting annoyed, yelling at them, we gotta go? Or are you patient with them, and do you help them so that you can get out the door quicker? How kind are you? And not just how kind are you, but like, who are you kind to? Are you kind to your friends, your family, people that you have common interests with? If so, awesome. But even the tax collectors and the Pharisees did that. Jesus calls us to take that next step. What about the person who cuts you off in traffic? Are you kind to them, or do you have really not nice things to say in your head? What about the person that doesn't believe in the same thing that you do, and they make fun of you, or they pick on you, or they're just genuinely mean to you? What about people that don't look like you, or people that disagree with you politically? What about the person that you run into in the supermarket? You went to high school with them, maybe college with them, you haven't seen them for years. How do they leave that conversation feeling? Is it, wow, I'm glad I ran into them, they're a nice person? Or is it more like, glad that's over, I never want to see them again? Do you rejoice with others and celebrate their wins? If your friend at work gets a promotion or a raise and you don't, do you get bitter and angry that you didn't? Or do you celebrate with them? Be like, you know what, that's awesome. You really deserved that. Do you hope for and believe in the best in everybody? Or do you get really cold and cynical and you just look for the worst in them and you wait for that moment when they inevitably let you down in some way, and so you can just be like, I knew it. I knew I shouldn't have trusted you. You let me down. Are you content with your life? Or do you have envy for what others have? This is a really easy or really difficult one, depending on how you want to look at it now with social media. You're standing in line at the grocery store, you got home from work, you want to sit down on the couch for 5 minutes and relax. What do? You pull out your phone, scroll through Instagram, and you see these perfectly manicured photos of other people's lives, the perfect moment that they want you to see. None of the behind-the-scenes garbage where all of the stuff, they threw it so they could take that picture. You see that one perfect thing, and you think, wow, why doesn't my house always look like that? Why don't I have that? Why do they have a nicer TV than me? I should have that. I'm just as good a person as them. My personal favorite one on the list is love keeps no record of wrongs. I feel like this should be a very obvious one. You don't keep score in a relationship and be like, well, yes, I did this one bad thing, but let me point to the other 6 bad things that you have done earlier that justify this one moment of me doing something stupid. Does anyone actually think that works? I don't know, but we live that way sometimes. We try and justify it. We try and think that, hey, I get it, I messed up, but you mess up a lot more than me, so on a scale, I'm better still somehow. And we could keep going with this list on and on and on, finding ways that in the last month, we've all probably just inevitably failed at one or more of these things in a way that we have fallen short of living that loving life that Jesus has called us to showing love to other people. See, love is living an unselfish, unhurried, and others-focused life like Jesus. And it all comes down to, what do you decide to focus on? Are you focused on somebody else, or are you focused on yourself? Are you selfish, or are you selfless? Another way to think about it, and like a good visual example, is, are you being like a black hole or a cell? Now, you guys definitely heard me right. I am a bit nerdy. Like I said, I love Star Wars. Science fiction stuff is awesome. So are you being like a black hole or a cell? These things are basically polar opposites of each other. You see, a black hole is like this infinitely dense point in space and time that has a super strong gravitational pull, that every single thing around it gets sucked in, and once it does, it ceases to exist. It gets torn apart. A black hole is the ultimate example of selfishness. It's all about me, 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 me. I got to keep adding. I need more. Then you look at a cell. A cell is basically the exact opposite of that. Like, the whole goal of a cell is essentially to give away everything it has that it can afford to get rid of to create a new cell. The cell doesn't sit there thinking like, yeah, I don't need this extra thing, but it's really cool to have, so I'm going to keep it. The cell doesn't care about what it still has. It gives up everything it can to make sure that someone else can exist. Another cell can be there. The cell wants to just continue to love and create more. So this week, are you going to be a black hole or a cell? Is everything going to be about you, or are you going to focus on other people? How are people going to feel when they walk away from the conversations? Are they going to feel uplifted, and loved on and happy and glad they talked to you? Or are they going to feel torn down and weary and just ready to go home and be away from you? How can we this week intentionally slow down, pay attention to those around us, and show them love? Paul gave us this list to help us remember what love is and what love is not. Now it's our job to go out and love those around us. Let's pray. Dear God, I thank you so much for this day that we can all come here and just dive into your word and listen to the leading of your Holy Spirit, God. I pray that as we leave here today, that we are able to slow down and really focus on the other people around us, not make everything about ourselves, but be focused on others and loving them where they are, God. I thank you for your son, Jesus, who's the ultimate example of how to live a loving life. And I pray that we can all do our best to live like him. It's in your son's name that we pray. Amen.